All right. Thanks everybody for joining us today. My name's Jeff Sample, and I'm going to be sort of your host for navigating prefabrication for electrical contractors. Before we dive into everything, I'm Jeff Sample. Like I said before, I'm from Bluebeam, Senior Industry Development Manager Trades. My job is to focus on the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing trades here at the start to really understand where they are as an industry, where we're moving, and where we're going, and represent that for Bluebeam and all of the Nemechek group here. So I'm excited. That's just who I am, but I'm really excited about who's sitting down with us today. So I'm going to start with my good friend Josh Bone. Josh, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, Jeff, it's great to be with you on a podcast again. It's been a little bit of time. My name is Josh Bone. I'm the executive director of Electric International, and we are the R&D lab for the electrical construction industry. We are tasked with the amazing opportunity to help electrical contractors stay ahead of the pace of change. We do conduct research, develop tools, pilot programs, incubate, do everything we can to stay at the forefront of the electrical construction space. And it's a privilege for me to do this. I've been doing it now for 5 years, Jeff, this month.
Wow, I can't believe it's 5 years, man. It seems like yesterday when you made the leap and joined them, and been fantastic to watch. You've been the resource I go to consistently. So has Electri and Nika, for understanding where electrical contractors are. And so I'm going to be excited to dig in with you in a minute. But we are joined, and the master behind putting this together and getting us to sit down and talk today is Patrick Sping. Patrick, give everybody a little introduction as to who you are and what you're doing today.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Jeff. I really appreciate having the opportunity of getting you two gentlemen here on a conversation with us and let us learn more about the future of prefab and kind of where we've come from and where we are headed. Josh, it's hard to believe that we're in the same state, and the only time we get to actually see each other or communicate is either a webinar or at a conference somewhere. You are probably the most traveled individual I know. Jeff, you and I have had a phenomenal opportunities over the last couple of weeks to spend some time together with some different industry events, and it's been really exciting to see what's going on in that front. A little bit about me. I've been in the AEC space for most of my career. I started in the technical side of things, really kind of training people how to use technology, doing some implementations, and then made the move into the sales world. Spent most of my side on the design world, and then spent some time with owners and operators and what they're actually looking from a turnover standpoint. And now I'm really focused on where things get put together. And that's where you two have a vast amount of industry experience, and I'm really looking forward to learn a little bit more about that. Manufacton was acquired by ALLPLAN in March of this year, which is a phenomenal thing. We've got great resources behind us, and the future has never looked better for Manufacton. So that's a little bit about me, Jeff. I'll hand it back over to you and let you kind of kick us off.
All right. So I'm always about kind of telling a story and kind of bringing people through where we are and how we got here, right? And that's why we reached out to Josh, because as we introduce ourselves here, with the Bluebeam team and ALLPLAN and Manufacton coming together to kind of work on these, what are critical components, how did we get here? So this is what we're going to talk about, is the evolution. So to get to the evolution, we have to start with the changing market and how did we get here? We're going to head into the current state and then, maybe where we'll go. So Josh, I want you to kind of start out with, give me an evolution. Where are we today and how did we get here?
So, Jeff, here's the thing that electrical has been behind the mechanical and the sheet metal trades for many reasons, but the primary reason is the electrical contractor has been forced to move and adapt more than any other trades. Sheet metal, they've got their coal lines, they've been in this space and they've claimed their space. Mechanical contractors have their slope pipe, which takes priority. Electrical has been forced to say, hey, put your vendors out here and work around this and navigate that. Well, design changes, all of these things have been a challenge, but we understand that we have to be committed to prefabrication as we now see a rise in demand from owners, watching a demand from owners requiring us to meet certain deliverables of what percentage of labor can be diverted off site. We have a labor shortage, and the electrical construction trade has been most impacted by the worker shortage. We're trying to do everything we can in our power to recruit in enough electricians, but I personally don't think we're ever going to hit the number. We've got to drive off-site. We've got to deliver prefab. We've got to meet the demands of the owners and the construction managers. And we're fortunate. The other trades have been very accommodating, working with us. They understand that our scope of the project is growing at a significant rate. We did research last year on a 150 bed hospital in South Carolina. Jeff, you know me, you know I love data. If we remove ourselves 25 years, a 150 bed hospital went from $98 million, where the electrical scope was 10 to 12% of the project. Today, a 150 bed hospital in South Carolina is over $220 million. The electrical scope is now 30 to 35% of the project. And the schedule, by the way, is half of what it was. So we've been forced into offsite and prefabrication to meet all these demands and being on par with our mechanical and sheet metal and plumbing partners.
I'm interested because, yeah, we've seen that scope grow in all areas, with the electrification of more and more of the chillers, et cetera, kind of leaning over on your side as well. But the mechanical and the sheet metal is all growing because of the needs. How has their evolution in really getting good at prefab, how can that help the electricals grow into prefab? And where are you seeing that? Because, we are hearing more and more they're accommodating because, I mean, let's be honest, you're 30 to 35%, you're doing it in half the time, and it's 100% more in cost. So, I mean, that's a lot of factors and reasons to push. Are you seeing help from that group and the ability to sort of, learn from them, but also come alongside them?
Yeah, I would say there's a couple of ways that we're learning from our mechanical and sheet metal partners, specifically the fact that they've created a demand and expectation of owners and construction managers. So now the expectation is set that you need to revert 10% of your labor off-site. So you need to have plans to no longer have vendors on site. You need to make sure that you're looking at safety, you're looking at quality. And again, the schedule is half of what it was 25 years ago on the same project that has a far more complicated electrical system. I think from a standpoint too, in learning through this process, there's been this misconception around, by doing prefab, you lose hours. When in reality, this is the new way of doing construction, how we deliver jobs on time and on budget. When you've got 50% of the schedule time, you got half the time to do it in, and the complexity, it's the only way that you can meet the growing owner's expectations, the CM's expectations, and mechanical and sheet metal with their coal lines, what they've done from a CAD/CAM standpoint, embracing, going from plasma cutting to laser cutting and now water jets, and watching the automated robotic arms. I'm seeing more of those. We're seeing the conduit vendors now all across the country popping up in our fab shops. They did pave the way, and now we're looking and thinking with that same lens, how much can we do offsite?
Yeah, and I'm wondering too, given their ability to push in, and now, for the electrical, like there's this need to be earlier in the design process to really be at the table sooner. And I know you've spoken a lot about that over time. To people listening, like, how is not being all the way down at the end and picking up the crumbs important to an electrical contractor?
It's absolutely essential. If you're going to play in that bid and close out phase, and that's where you're going to live, it's going to limit your ability to do prefab and offsite significantly. You cannot live in that space. You've got to move up into the value chain. Just call it what it is. The electrical drawings, the quality of plans and the level of information that we're receiving in plans isn't at all-time low. So the schedule's picking up and going to continue to get faster. The information we're getting from the engineers is less complete and is only moving in that direction. 10 years ago, pre-construction for an electrical contractor was really an unheard of topic. It was primarily the general contractor's focus. While in the electrical space now, our scope has now grown with that front end of pre-construction, this is a huge opportunity to divert a lot of the time and energy that would have traditionally been in that scope where electrical contractors live, from creating a bid and living in that 3 bids in the buy world to close out. Now we've expanded this whole timeline out with pre-construction, and with us too, 70B, NFPA 70B is a big deal, Jeff. I've talked to you a lot about that, but service and maintenance has always been at the forefront, tip of tongue for mechanical contractors. Now we see with this shift of electrification, with our world of bid to close out, that schedule continues to get pressed. So we have to focus more time and energy in pre-construction, and it's even creating more opportunities with electrification on the back end for service and maintenance. I feel like we're in a really good spot as electrical contractors to capitalize on the changing market. Supply chain challenges have impacted electrical more than anyone else. Well, guess what can help that? Prefab. Guess what can help that? Pre-construction. Guess what? While it does create challenges, it opens up more doors and opportunities and how we can get involved earlier to manage supply chain challenges. And while the last 5 years has brought a lot of complexity, we talk a lot about VUCA, volatility, uncertainty, complexity. Guys, that's the world we live in. And the great thing is, even though it presents those challenges, it presents a tremendous amount of opportunity for electrical contractors to own and manage that risk in a way that they've never done.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing to understand that VUCA environment, and going where the risk is where the money is. So yeah, it's changing where we make money, but the opportunity to do that in a more calculated way, I'd say, yeah, sure, it seems like the hours on site are going down, but the opportunity to charge for pre-construction, the opportunity to get involved earlier, to set up your shops, but then to also, and this is where I want to bring Patrick in, but to also really maximize that process and drive more profit through repeatability in your shops, right? Those are the places that you can control. You cannot control what's going on site as much as you can in a fabrication facility, right? And if you're doing more and shifting more in pre-construction and you have a view of all the projects that you're working on, you can create a consistency that drives, the ability to purchase things sooner and, manage your supply chain earlier. But also, we know this, right? Uncertainty. But if you go to manufacturers with the list of what you need ahead of time and can pre-order, you got an opportunity to drive not only your cost down, but increase the probability that you're going to get those things when you need it, which if you're ordering for a site is completely different. So I'm interested, Patrick, because this, I see all these opportunities for tools if the processes that Josh is talking about are ready. What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, that's exactly right, Jeff. It boils down to visibility, right? Instead of just being, knowledgeable about what's going on a particular project on a particular day or week, it's really about looking ahead 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. In some instances, if you've got a 6-month look ahead or an 18-month look ahead, the opportunity to go to your vendors and say, hey, this is what I'm looking for. Some of the vendors, the distributors might not be really interested in that, but their suppliers, the manufacturers of those particular products have a big interest in knowing, wow, I know that I need to have this type of raw material available for these distributors so that my end users are actually going to have the ability to use that product. We've had some conversations within non-related to electrical space, but really looking at carpeting, right? I can commit to needing this much carpeting over the next 18 months. And the distributor is really looking at how can we help fulfill those needs. So the same capabilities and possibilities are available in the electrical space. It's just about how are we gathering that information. The term or the position virtual design construction person, manager, department, whatever, 10 years ago was kind of non-existent. I think in the electrical space, it's becoming more and more predominant, right? It's just not the BIM guy or the guy or gal that's working on that specific drawings. It's really making use of that technology. So you're thinking about it with the design for manufacturing and assembly standpoint, not how are we going to bend this pipe? It's really how are we going to install it when it gets to the field? And what kind of things are we going to potentially be running into prior to bringing it to the field, right? And that all boils down to technology. doesn't really necessarily matter what modeling tool you're using from our perspective. It's being able to pull the data from that model that's there and expanding upon it. So the possibilities are endless. Jeff, we have some things that we're talking with you on the Bluebeam side of things that are just very, very, very cool and earth shattering. We can't talk too much about that at this point, but it's changing the game, right? It's moving it away from, the design team and really putting the opportunity to make some impact on the design from the field. So I think that's really where we see things changing from a technology standpoint.
Yeah, it's all about changing the process and changing the way we do it. We can't talk a lot about, what we're thinking, but if you can imagine, again, it's Josh, it's decision making, right? You've talked about this. A lot of the supply chain issues have really focused on the need and draw on electrical equipment. And so that is a great opportunity for electricals to look for alternatives as early as they can and identify either, do I need to look for alternatives, or do I need to get out ahead and make sure that I'm firming up the design and making that order as soon as possible so I can get more predictable? All those tools and all that works great, but this also requires a mind shift. And so the evolution in that current state, Josh, I want you to focus on, how do the current electricals that are wanting to dive in or are partway in having to change their mindset and having to change their focus? Because we traditionally did it very differently than I think we're going to be doing it in the future.
Absolutely. Jeff, from a current state standpoint, we're experiencing in the electrical construction space, the value of an electrical construction company has risen immensely. We're watching massive industry consolidations through mergers and acquisitions. We're watching a lot of electrical contractors that have been out there in business and done well, reaching a point that they're ready to sell assets and they're ready to ride off into the sunset. There's a massive amount of change in the electrical construction space, and we see the rise of the super subs and the mechanical and electrical contractors now coming together. And that is the current space. And what we're seeing now is never letting a good crisis go to waste. I think it was Churchill that said that. When you've got the worker shortage, let's call it what it is. Jeff, my son's going into the apprenticeship. I'm committed to this. My nephew, they all see the advantages and have a front row seat to what electrical contractors do and opportunities. Where I'm seeing this shift now is even moving away from cost. It's about meeting schedule. It's about meeting demands. It's about adding value. It's about customer focused innovation. The contractors that are out there today, no longer living in that 3-bid and a buy space, no longer focused on being a labor broker. What am I bringing to the table? How do I differentiate myself? How do I help my customers navigate supply chain challenges, understanding the lead times on transformers, understanding the lead time on generators, understanding how this is a moving target. I'm watching growth in pre-construction, as we said, but also in business development and communication and how you interact with the CM, how you interact with the other trades. It's no longer, I think the days of in construction, we need to stop thinking about who can be the cheapest and the fastest and the safest in this race to the bottom. Who can do those things, but do it in a time frame and do it for a cost that's meeting the needs of that job. Each job comes with different constraints. And I'm watching a lot of my contractors evolve as companies starting to realize with worker shortage, hey, why am I going to go perform work that is not profitable for me? My business is not built to do certain aspects, maybe running branch conduit. That's how do I manage that? What processes do I put in place? I'm starting to look at a job today with a different lens and saying ability doesn't equal profitability. How do I sub out portions of this job where in the past I would have been holding on to that job with every fiber of my being to keep other contractors off that job? Now I need to be realistic. I may sub out this to Jeff. I may joint venture on an aspect of this with Patrick. I'm looking at a job from a whole new lens and trying to understand, how do I prescribe prefab? How do I prescribe modular? How do I prescribe? We diagnose the job, look at the risk, look at profitability, and now start to see that job with a very different lens. Where can I go in and get my UL listing from my panel shop? Maybe I even buy products different than I would have in the past. Maybe I am going to prefab this, but maybe not. Maybe I'm going to buy it from another contractor. And I think that's that future that now we're talking about. We're starting to get into those possibilities of moving from prefab to manufacturing and really starting to think about that next phase beyond prefab to where it's more offsite, and it may be volumetric, it may be modular. It's a completely different landscape.
Yeah, and it's a completely different mind shift, and it's important because in that process there, you and I've talked about this a lot over the years, is there's a bit of productization and in that process, and that is really difficult for people who've called themselves craftspeople for years, right? They are still craftspeople, but now the craft and the value is in your skills and your ability to look at jobs and, like you said, prescribe and diagnose. You're now an electrical doctor, right? You are really, the value is in your experience and your ability to understand the project, the timelines, and the way in which you can prefab. And I really like that because this is an opportunity for people to get hyper focused on the things they're good at. So, if you used to buy out 16 scopes and now those scopes aren't all profitable for you, which, by the way, to give Josh a little plug, what do you need, Josh, to know what's profitable?
You need data. You need data. You need insights. You need,
Yeah.
yeah.
And more importantly, how do you collect that data, right?
Yes.
Do you have somebody that's standing right next to some specific thing and writing down data? No, it's not real efficient, right? Anything that you can do to capture data as a byproduct of the process, that's where you're winning, right? You're not having to go in at the end of the day and make notes of, hey, we did this or we did that. So tools that actually capture data, how long this machine's running, how long this person's active, how long did we bid on this product, how long did it actually take? That's really where it's all about. That's giving you, Josh, the data that you want that's clean.
Yes,
Yeah.
passive data collection is the future of the easier we can capture that data. And the word is standardization. How can you standardize that data, and how can you standardize processes? And that's that's the evolving conversation that I have with contractors. I can very quickly understand at what stage of evolution they are in their business. The 1.0 focused on revenue, the 2.0 focused on growing their team, the 3.0 that's starting to look at process. Now you're starting to tell me that you're looking at how do you standardize your buys, your material management, how do you standardize steps and processes. It's a word that is so complex for many, but once you reach that point, everyone finally gets to that stage where, yes, this is construction, everything's a one-off, but there is so much opportunity to standardize. And that's in our data, that's in our prefab, that's in our manufacturing, that's in every aspect. And I'm watching our contractors move from this mom and pop type business to corporations and really letting data help influence decisions based off key performance indicators. And Jeff, where I want to go. I want Electri to be the industry benchmarking tool and define those key performance indicators. Create best practices around SOPs and standard operating procedures. But I want to be able to help contractors look at, say, every contractor tells us, Jeff, I spend a ton of money every month on software. Do you really? Based on your size, based in your market, yes, maybe you do. No, maybe you don't. They're just operating in their own bubble. And I hope that what Electri can be is help kind of broaden their horizons and benchmark and help them really see that you do or you don't spend a lot of money on fleet. You do or don't spend a lot of money on software.
Well, and that's the thing for me, Josh, in looking at that is like, I came from the IT side of things. And, even back in my days of working for contractors, it was, hey, this line item's growing every year. When's it going to stop? And it was looking like it was drawing away value. And I'm like, no, you're not looking at this at a TCO level, a total cost of ownership, of understanding the visibility that these products are giving you and these tools are giving you. And I'm giving you the basics of like software connectivity. You're not looking at people driving to the office. So no, you're not looking at the gas bill and the wear and tear on the people that can now just fire up a computer and work from wherever they are or have a connectivity in a trailer. I'm like, we're just not looking at this at a holistic level. And so that's why, having that benchmark and having those KPIs and understanding what you're achieving and then measuring that against your business is what really drives a ton of value and visibility. And I like that you said that, that's are we actually producing more efficiently at the right level? The spend is the spend is the spend, right? But let's look at what are we able to pump out through our shop? How much more work are we capable of providing? And by the way, at what profit level? And that's where, going back to Patrick's and the ability to passively collect data. If I can passively collect that data and I can look at those 16 scopes that I used to buy out every time and fight for and go, well, look, like I'm great at these and I am not great at these. I bet you I have a partner in my network that is great at these, that, like you said, I don't have to lose that scope. I can JV it, right? I can create relationships that allow me to focus on where I'm great. Because the one thing is, look, we're going to throw money at software. We're going to throw money at materials. We're going to throw money at people. The one thing we can't create more of is time.
Yep.
And they're cutting it in half on us. Like you said earlier, these schedules are half. So that time is critically valuable. And by the way, time is money to a hyperscaler that's about to put out and open up its doors. It's critical to a chip manufacturer. It's critical to a lab. It's critical even more to a pharmaceutical company. They will pay more. They will pay more money. So I'm interested, Patrick, you heard all of that and wanted to jump in, but I wanted to give him a little bit of background. Now jump in and, what are your thoughts on all of that?
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. I appreciate that. And Josh, I have to ask a question. I was at a conference, so I don't know, maybe 4 years ago, and one of the presenters was talking about the value of data and asked the group of contractors what percentage of you are collecting data or are making business decisions based on the data you are collecting. Less than 5% of the audience raised their hands. And this is a well-attended conference or a session at a conference. There was maybe 100 people in there. If that same person were to ask that question today, based on your travels and experience, do you see that pivoting towards the other side? Do you see that there's more people out there, contractors specifically, that are recognizing the value of data and trying to drive their business based on that?
So I would say the number would be a little bit higher, but where I think we're about to go, Patrick, is there's a lot of focus around that. I'm watching great CEOs evolve and spend more time working on their business, less time in the business. And a big portion of that is refining processes and really trying to understand not only productivity at the face of installing electrical equipment, but productivity of producing an invoice, creating purchase orders. Yeah, I think we're on the hockey stick analogy. I'll refer to that. I think we're just starting to enter that tick up phase. I think we're going to see KPI was not I said KPI, Jeff, you know this. I said it, when I remember the first data talk I did with the contact crew back in the day in Atlanta. That was a long time ago. And that was really one of the very first data conversations that we had. These are now terms. KPI are at the tip of, really, it's conversational. And where, Patrick, I think we're at that phase now. We're watching the construction industry evolve from this mom and pop type mentality to a true corporate type. We understand the value of data more now than ever. And we're seeing a separation. You're seeing the big get bigger, and you're seeing the sophisticated get more sophisticated, and they're starting to leave some behind. But there's a lot of companies today really committed to capturing that data, standardizing that data, understanding their key performance indicators, and making decisions, that are influenced with that knowledge.
You made a very interesting point. You said that some of yours are getting more sophisticated. And I think some of the ones that are becoming more sophisticated, we had a conversation with one of our customers a few weeks ago, and they brought up the fact that they recognized real quickly, or not real quickly, as quickly as they had liked, that they are not building a building inside of a building. It's not the same thing, right? It's a manufacturing environment. It's not a bunch of individual projects that you're moving through the shop. It's true manufacturing mindset. So some of our organizations, the ones that are finding some success, or they're bringing people in from a manufacturing background, not necessarily a construction background. Quite interesting to see how the industry is evolving from that standpoint.
I'm touring more manufacturing facilities now. Each year that passes, I see our contractors moving like, here's our fab shop, but let me take you through my modular facility. Let me take you through my manufacturing facility where they have their UL listings and they have all of those components where it truly is manufacturing. We are living in that today, and we're going to see more and more of that in the future.
Right.
Yeah, well, Josh, you challenged me to think about sitting in that restaurant and you showing me that data talk and going, oh man, what is this going to do? How do you think they're going to take this? What do you think they're going to? I mean, I vividly remember. I mean,
I
for
almost
those
pulled
of
the
you
plug,
who,
Jeff. I almost pulled the plug. I mean, remember, I woke up that morning and said, I'm not going to do this talk. We're not ready for it.
I had to have breakfast with you and say you're going to do this talk. And I remember very few people will ever remember Josh Bone being nervous before going on stage in a way that was like true nerves, not the little bit of nerves.
Crippling
Yeah,
nerves. I mean, really.
like I was thinking we had to go up there with them, but I will go back to you sitting with me and me saying, listen, man, do you think I can do this? And go up there and say, like, new technology, new workforce. Like, we are a bit of a monoculture in construction around we pull construction people in to do and continue to evolve. And that's created some fragility for us because and I joke about this a lot, and it's on a recent show coming out of the Contact Crew if you want to check it out. But it's, that's like asking a chef, can you farm? No, you can't. You're a great installer. So what you need is to take people from manufacturing who think differently, take people from logistics and supply chain in other areas and bring them into your business and teach them what we do. Yes, we can't manufacture our products the way you might manufacture certain other products, but ultimately that product process and that manufacturing process and understanding scale and the things that drive repeatability and profitability, et cetera, are critical. And then, yeah, we do need to take a field foreman. We do need to take a soup into the office and say, or into the fab facility and say, okay, listen, that's great, but we're going to have to install it, right? We're going to have to transport it. We're going to have to do it in a laydown yard in a way that's different. So great, you can teach those people, and all of a sudden now you have a mixing of understanding. You have logistics people who are incredible at it, but now they're learning what a job site logistics looks like. Okay, well, they can change their mindset. Same thing when it comes to manufacturing. Same thing when it comes to BIM and VDC and design. The ability to look at and use tools. We have gamers in our world now. Again, this is the opportunity because we just came from Unbound, and I have to say this, like, it was really wild to see Duncan Wardle say that the two most important skills moving forward are creativity and a trade. The ability to build, the ability to do things that AI cannot do.
Right.
And so, I mean, now in electrical, now is the time. And it's a huge opportunity. You said this, they're focusing more on business. And I would say, to answer Patrick's question earlier, I'm seeing data curiosity grow. And yeah, there's always those leaders, right, that are pushing the boundaries ahead and are data focused. But I'm seeing more of the have-nots, like you would say, being data curious. And now's a killer time for that because the tooling that's available now that those others had to go through, if you think about some of the suffrage that people had to go through before the modern tool sets existed. You know, if I had to pick an opportunity right now, now's the time I'd want to join the electrical world because the tooling is there for us. And I'm interested, Josh, in understanding like your focus, because as those are growing bigger, right, and the gap is growing, how can the smaller contractor leverage that advantage? Because I actually think they have an advantage. What are your thoughts on how they can move forward and how we take this? So we've talked about the past, the present. What's that future look like?
Well, the future for so many contractors is in specialization and being profitable and understanding who they are and where their business is profitable. Where are they approaching a job? Who are they partnering with? Where do they fit in that overall process? Jeff, that is so critical today that, by and large, it's been owning a job and owning every bit of it. But where I think the future is taking us is I think we're going to see electrical contractors out there that in some ways may start to look at that diagnose and prescription and start to say, okay, you know what I'm really good at? I'm going to build my business out and I'm going to invest in these areas and I'm going to be extremely efficient and focus on this in my fab shop. And then I may go buy modular components. I may go and sub out. I may go joint venture. You're going to see some of these contractors out there now start to look at a job and say, I've got the relationship with the owner. I'm very focused on service and maintenance on the back end, but I'm going to have a plan and I'm going to show quality and I'm going to bring the right people. I'm going to look more like a CM from an electrical standpoint on this job and knowing where I'm profitable. You're going to see that now you know what, I'm going to build out a panel shop and I'm going to sell panels and I'm going to create this and create productization of components that contractors can buy from me. I think the future is less generalization and less of a labor broker and less focus on how I can supply labor as to how I can grow a profitable business that fills a niche in my market. And maybe that's me partnering with larger contractors. Maybe that's me becoming more sophisticated and filling the gap. There's so much work out there with data centers. As we're talking about quantum computing being here in 2 to 3 years, we're talking about all the power generation that it takes to power these AI data centers. We're talking about the grid modernization, everything that is electrification and the energy transition. There is abundance of opportunities. We live in abundant times in the electrical construction space. If you're not careful and you're not focused, your market share can reduce locally if you're not playing the game that it needs to be played with. Jeff, we talk a lot about Simon Sinek and the infinite game. This is a perfect example of that. We're living in abundant times in the electrical construction industry. So much data center work, so much investment, and all of these components that are tied to the changing economy that's driven by data. Everything is being electrified. We're in a great place, a great time. We've got to take advantage of those opportunities. And much of that means evolving our businesses to be more specialized.
Well, you hit on a couple of critical components in that, Simon Sinek infinite game. The rules are changing completely. And that is a huge opportunity. And it's where I kind of want to focus it back. Because if you're going to do all the things that Josh is talking about as a company, you're going to have to get your head out of running your business, right? And being in the business and working on the business. And that's the opportunity to take new tools and to take new technology and get that visibility. Because if you're going to go specialized, you've got to do it with a visibility and a level of precision that you now have the capability to do. And Patrick, that's kind of why we wanted to bring Josh here is to talk a little bit about like, what does that look like from the software side and from the technology enablement for contractors that are doing what I think the world is telling them they've got to do?
Yeah, that's a loaded question, Jeff. The technology is there. It's just a matter of people deciding that they need to make that jump into using technology and then really setting somebody as the kind of the point person to be responsible for deploying that technology. Let them be the champions. And most importantly, have that champion very much in the know of what the business objectives are. So don't send them out just to deploy a piece of software. Send them out with an understanding of what you're trying to accomplish as an organization so that that person can go and lead the organization toward that path. It has to be a bottom-up approach as well as a top-down approach. Everybody has to come together, understand the challenges that lie ahead, and figure out a way to move forward and enable that group of people with the tools and the technology and the training that they need to make the company successful. Too many times people buy a piece of software thinking that's going to be the end all be all. It's just the beginning, right? You really need to have a plan, and you need to have a group of people that are understanding what the business objectives are that you're trying to accomplish and go forward and move with that plan. You know, most of the time when I'm talking to customers, my first conversation is, why are you talking to us? What problem is it you're trying to solve? I can give you a demo, but at the end of the demo, you're going to be confused and you're going to be overwhelmed, and nothing's ever going to come of it. Until we really understand what we're trying to accomplish inside of our business, you're really kind of wasting your time investing in any type of technology. Once you have that solid understanding, then there's a way to go and find a tool that's going to help you solve those issues.
Yeah, that's the key to it all, isn't it, Josh? You start at the top, right? You start as a business and understand as an electrical contractor or any type of contractor if you happen to be listening in, and low voltage, whatever. Figure out what your goal is. Really identify it as a business, codify that, and drive that forward and make every decision based on moving towards that. Whether you're specializing in a certain scope of work, whether you're specializing in fab, whatever it is that you're working on, you push towards that, you set those goals out, and then you try to determine the processes that you need to implement. And when implementing those processes and understanding how to get better at them, you lay software over top of them to capture that data, to drive and understand. But ultimately, I will tell you this, and this is the most critical component of continuous improvement, is to celebrate when you find things that are broken. Because as you start to do this process, you are going to find that half of what you're doing in your flow, in your shop, on your job is wrong. Right? It is a broken process, and you need to celebrate that you have the opportunity to fix it and drive those efficiencies to the end. And that's how it goes, right, Josh? It's people, it's process, it's technology. And in that order, the right people with the right process, with the right technology can really drive your business. So I think we've nailed it, guys. And I really think we have. Josh, I want to get your final thoughts.
I'm very excited about this industry. Having a front row seat for so many years to watching change and how fast the pace of change is really coming at us today is exciting. It's scary. And, I'm so optimistic. As Jeff, I always am. I'm always a half glass full guy. And I see so much opportunity right now to create profitable, successful businesses. Our industry has been so riddled with managing risk and operating on low margins. You said it earlier about AI. It's not going to replace an electrician. It's not going to replace a plumber. Of all the things it's going to replace, the last one it's going to replace are these skilled trade technicians. Now, I believe that a one-size-fits-all electrician is a real challenge to think that you can be everything to everyone when the job is more than doubled in price and the electrical scope is more than tripled. Specialization is a big part of this. And, I'm telling my son, low voltage, buddy, low voltage. This is where you want to be. This is an amazing opportunity to be with a building over its life cycle and create opportunities. I'm so excited to see, the impact of smart homes, smart buildings, smart grid, seeing how we go to construction and it looks more like manufacturing. It's more focused on value than being the cheapest and fastest. Our industry is going through an S-curve change. We've never seen that in the construction space. We're living at a great, exciting time to have a front row seat to this. And I know they keep telling us more is going to change in the next 10 years than the previous 100. Buckle up. I'm ready to go.
Yeah.
I've got my seatbelt on and I'm ready for the ride, my friend. I'm with you. We're going to open it up to questions, and we really want to hear from people. Ask questions of me, of Josh, of Patrick, and let us know what you need to do.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Jeff. We appreciate it. And it looked like we have one question that came in for you. I suspect you can still hear us there, Jeff. It was talking about the TCO, or total cost of ownership, for software. And the question was, other than labor costs, are there any other cost savings that you'd be looking for?
There's a number of different costs, and I can't hear you. Let me know if you hear me all right there, Patrick.
Yep, loud and clear.
All right. There are a number of different cost factors that should go into a total cost of ownership when you're not just looking at saving labor hours. And in fact, I think the labor hours fallacy is a big problem, because I don't know of any implementation of software I've ever done where I give people time back and I send them home after 30 hours in the week. We've always got more high value processes and things for them to do. So it's more at looking at how much more value can they be driving in the work that they're doing, and allowing the tools to do the things that were manual, whether that's simply coding different things as they go through, when you can automate that. If you're looking at a good, fabrication system that, as a piece of material goes through the shop floor, it's automatically being costed to a job. So they're not having to do picks and clicks. They're actually looking at, their ability to put more material through the floor. There's a couple of other different ways I like to look at fleet management. So many of our companies don't spend time really looking at the wear and tear on their vehicles, the travel of their vehicles, the gas, etc., and focus on the value that can be driven through just a really solid fleet management, tracking, and system for automating, deliveries. It seems simple, but I hope that sort of answers that question.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And then here was a follow-up question. This one's kind of near and dear to my heart, but I'm going to let you answer it because it's directed at you. When you talk about a mind shift in the way we think about work, and his comment is, honestly, they're just overwhelmed with how do we start and where do we start? What do we need to do, and how can we get going? I've got my opinion, but I'm not going to say anything.
Well, I want you to jump in when I'm done here, but what I want you to start with, and this is for everybody, because I'm actually here at a large conference speaking with a lot of owners of companies, different vertical in the sheet metal vertical here, and HVAC, but they're all struggling with those problems. Even the ones who are pretty far down their digitization journey. And they always ask that question, we're overwhelmed, where do we get started on the next thing? And you always have to start with the problem.
Right.
But I was taken aback this trip when I was talking to one of the people who's on a panel with me. And he said, yeah, Jeff, that's great and all, you're right. He said, but in my opinion, you have to begin with the end in mind. Remember that. Remember, as a business owner, as a principal in a company, as somebody who's responsible for where you're going to go, think about 5 years, 10 years. Where do you want to be as an organization? If you're a 1 to 5 electrical, if you're a 50-person electrical, it's a different group of people that are having the conversation than if you're at the hundreds and thousands. But you best sit down and say, this is what we think we want to do and where we want to be. And then go back to, these are the problems and roadblocks and barriers that are preventing us from getting there. How do we start to tackle them? And it's important to do it that way so that you're always pulling towards a goal. Will that goal, and possibly could that goal, change if you go back to what Josh talked about on the infinite game? Sure, those rules could change. But if you're not pulling towards something, you're going to pull in a lot of different directions, and you're just going to get overstretched, and you're going to find out that you are spending way more money on technology than you should. And that's a key indicator. If you think you're spending more on technology than you should, and not getting the return, take a moment to take an inventory of what you've got and an inventory of why you've got it and what it's doing, and is it pulling towards that goal. So I think begin with the end in mind, start with that goal, but then start with the problems, get out in the field. That was the other person on my panel this week who they really found the change in the company came when they surveyed the company. And I'm talking about field level. I'm talking about, this is a very advanced shop that, you know, hadn't really digitized much yet. And they asked them about their problems, and they came back with pretty simple things like, why am I emailing this detail question to 5 different people? Why am I emailing this RFI? Why am I chasing this stuff down? And wow, they started to fix those problems, and they started to get people on board and really excited.
Yeah, I would agree with you 100% on that. Focus on what the biggest pain point is too, you know, but don't really try and, you know, look at it holistically, I guess is the easiest way to say it. Pick the low-hanging fruit. You know, there's something that you can go in and you can solve a problem relatively quickly and do that. What we run into a lot of prospects that we're working with is they kind of get eat up with paralysis by analysis, right? They just can't make a decision to make any direction and choice, any direction, just because they want to continue to analyze what it is they want to do. Pick the one simple thing that you're trying to accomplish, pick that off and move forward. So yeah, that's some words of advice.
I think you're spot on, man. I mean, remember that perfection is the opposite of progress. You're never going to get it perfect. You've got to just start moving forward, but also in that process, realize that you're going to make mistakes. Again, another person recently just said to me, like, the most powerful thing he and his company have been able to do is implement a software and say, nope, this wasn't right, and pull out, work with the vendor. And he even said the vendor was in the room in one of the discussions we were having. He said, listen, I love the software. I think it's great stuff. That's why we bought it. We realized that the way it works for us does not work. And we had to go our separate ways kindly. And I'm here to say that they were a good partner in that process, but they weren't a fit. So remember, it's not a reflection of you as the owner of the company, as the IT person, as the BIM and VDC director that made the decision that it didn't work. Sometimes things just don't work. So don't let that stop you from continuing to try and creating a process around it.
Yep, couldn't agree more. Well, Jeff, it looks like that's it. Doesn't look like we have any additional questions out on the board. And I want to thank you all for your time. And if you need anything, please feel free to reach out to me at pspink@allplan.com, and I will be happy to answer some questions for you. And thank you again very much, and we look forward to talking to you again soon. Have a wonderful day, everybody.